Good evening and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us. Tonight is the fourth and final installment of Appleruth's College Week, and I think we have saved the best for last. We have a terrific group of students joining us this evening, and they're going to share with you the inside scoop, what it was like to go through the college application process in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and they've lived to tell the tale, and they're going to talk about the schools they're heading to, why they chose them, and what they learned about themselves and the application process along the way. You probably have a lot of questions about that process. And so if you are thinking of questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A box at any point during our conversation, and we will be delighted to answer your questions, hear your stories, and share with you as much as we possibly can in the next hour. I'm really excited to introduce you to our panelists this evening. They're a terrific group of students, all Appleruth alumni, as we like to call them, students who are coming to you from lots of different parts of the country and heading to lots of different places for school, each for their own reason. So I'm excited to introduce them to you. First up, we have Ashley Aaron. Ashley is a senior at the Paideia School in Atlanta, and she'll be attending Vanderbilt University in the fall. Ashley is interested in studying economics, and her activities include soccer, computer programming, peer tutoring, and cooking, which is something lots of us have been doing in the last year, I think. Abdul Bari is a senior at Greater Atlanta Christian School and heading to the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the fall. Among other things, he will be, I believe, playing football at UAB, and he's also going to be studying the biological, sciences as he hopes to prepare for medical school. Anna Feiner is heading to the University of Georgia. She is going to graduate from Boone High School in Orlando, and she hopes to major in communication studies. And in high school, she's been active in dance, USY, which is the United Synagogue Youth Group, and orchestra. Alex Gillespie is a senior at New Canaan High School in Connecticut and will be attending Colby College in the fall. She hasn't decided on a major yet, but she's interested in psychology and business. And in her free time, she enjoys playing volleyball and guitar and is, I'm told, a puzzle master. Miles Silsby is a senior at the Murray School in Washington, D.C. Miles is heading to Tufts, where he plans to combine his interests in chemistry, physics, and philosophy, hopefully on his way to medical school as well. Perhaps you and Abdul will run into each other down the road. In high school, he's been involved in social justice, tech theater, and scientific research. Matthew Sperry is a senior at Mason High School in Virginia. He's a competitive ice dancer and an avid camper who plans to major in mechanical engineering at the University of Michigan. Max Wicks, last but not least, is a senior at Wilson High School in Washington, D.C., and he's heading to Drexel University for their awesome digital media studies program that will allow him to combine his interest in graphic design and coding while he pursues a series of co-ops, which is different internships that he'll do while he's in school. So I want to thank this incredible panel for being willing to share their evening with us tonight. They are in the midst of exams and graduation preparation, so I'm grateful for their time and energy, and I'm grateful to you all who are tuning in. So feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box, and as I say, we'll try and get to as many of them as we possibly can in the next hour. I've got a few questions that we had submitted before we got started tonight, so I'll start with those. Ashley and Anna, if I can ask the two of you to start and just tell us a little bit about how you embarked on your college search. Anna, do you want to go first, and then Ashley?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Anna. I started in around May last year. So I got kind of like an early start, but really I didn't actually start writing until like August after the summer. And I started looking at colleges around my area. So I live in Florida. So I looked at a lot of Florida colleges, but also a lot of colleges out of state that I was interested in. And I just kind of went from there and chose which schools I might be interested in and which schools I wouldn't be by just like researching and asking around.
Well, I was actually blessed, but at the time I thought I was cursed with having an older sibling who's 1 year above me. And so I was forced to start the college process a little bit early. It ended up being the end of my sophomore year. I was being dragged along on all these tours. And now I'm very grateful for this opportunity because obviously COVID limited the ability to travel and see schools. So I actually got to see a ton of schools. And what I realized is it's just as important to see things you like as things that you don't like. And I was dragged along to schools that I had never heard of, schools I never wanted to step foot on again, and then schools that I absolutely loved. And so I kind of just started to realize that creating this melting pot of schools, big and small, kind of helped me realize what I wanted. And yeah, I leaned on my older sister for support in the writing process and filling out my application. And I just, having older students and counselors and parents, I just have realized that that's more helpful than you could ever imagine.
Thank you both. Miles and Max, I'm going to ask the two of you to reflect on college visits. Miles, you had the opportunity to do visits kind of early in the process, and Max, you didn't get to go on any college campuses until after you had been admitted. So if each of you could kind of talk about what it was like to be on those visits, what things did you notice? What did you find yourself responding to? And Miles, do you see those visits differently now upon reflection? And Max, what was it like to sort of try to imagine yourself on those campuses? Miles, you start us off, and then Max, you'll join in.
Yeah, so I was able to visit a lot of schools actually, I guess in the winter, like fall winter of, I guess it was 2019. So like very much a very long time ago. And then like Ashley was saying, it was helpful to see schools that I really liked and schools I really didn't like, just to kind of get a sense for what direction I wanted to then further guide my like college research into. And I actually then went back to a lot of visit a lot of schools virtually, like a couple months later after COVID had really kind of wiped out the opportunity to visit again. But I think things that I responded most to on the tours were when I was able to uh, actually like get up to the front of a group and talk to the tour guide, like when you're walking between spots, because a lot of times the tour guides kind of stop at like the library and they talk about that, and then you walk 5 minutes to the dining hall and then they talk about that. But those in between times are actually really helpful if you have really niche or more specific questions you want to ask, without kind of disrupting the general flow of the tour. I also think that the first like I think 3 or 4 tours I even went on were schools that I never even ended up applying to. They were just like a really big school in the city and then like a really small school in the countryside. And so I was really looking more in the beginning for types of schools and general like things that I could say, oh, well, maybe I'm not able to visit this school, but I visited a school like that, and here's my experience with that. And so I think that helped later in the process just to be able to compare schools, even if I wasn't able to visit every single school on my list.
Yeah, so I had like the opposite experience. I None of the schools I applied to, well, by the time I applied to all of my schools, I'd visited none of them, which was very weird. But I kind of just, throughout the whole process of researching schools and deciding where I was going to apply, just thought about what I was comfortable in, and that was a city environment. So I mainly just applied to city schools because I knew I could live in a city and I liked living in a city, and I liked it more than a small town vibe. So I stuck with what I knew. Apart from that, I tried to do a lot of the virtual tours, the virtual information sessions. I tried to get what I could out of those. But I found like the best thing for me was just doing my own research. I would spend like hours on every college's like just website and looking through majors and clubs, and there's so much stuff on YouTube that you can find where students are doing their own tours of their dorms, of whatever school or college building they're in, or the dining hall. So there's just a lot you can get online. And then by the time I don't think I visited a school till like January or February. So at that point I knew most of the schools that I'd gotten into. And so by that point, I got to visit the campus. I didn't really get a tour per se, but I got to walk around the campus and annoy some students and talk to them. But yeah, I found that kind of what I saw online was what I saw in person. I didn't really learn too much that I didn't already know. So yeah, that was very that made me feel good about my research. Yeah.
That's really helpful to hear, Max. And I've been hearing a lot from my colleagues in college admissions that they are watching what you're watching, like what you're paying attention to on their websites and what you're responding to. And that's a big way that students have to demonstrate interest, which can be an important part of the college application process. They're also giving you all the answers to the why you want to go to their school question that's part of the application. So it's good, it's valuable research on a lot of levels. Matthew, you are a competitive skater, and so I'm sure you might have been looking at colder climates, places where your season might last longer. And Abdul, I know that you have played sports in high school and will continue when you get to college. So if each of you could talk a little bit about how that detail sort of played a role in your search, how that might have varied. Abdul, if you want to start us off, and then Matthew join in.
Of course. So at JC, I play football. I'm a lineman, offensive and defensive. And when searching for colleges, I began my college search thinking that, yes, football is going to be like the main goal in a way, that I want to play football during college. However, when I understood my major and stuff like that, I understood that football couldn't be the biggest thing while going to college, since I am doing biomedical sciences, which is a STEM. And so that became a smaller end of it. And so what I'm thinking now is, instead of being like on the main team, doing like intramural or something that will allow me to divide my time better, because football is a very time-taking sport, taking up 5 hours, 6 from your day, and then you're just left with whatever coach gives you. And so it can be really stressful and hard in many ways. And so now that I understand how to divide my time and understand what I need to get done in a day to be successful, I've put down the requirement of what football needs to supplement for what my end goal is, which is becoming a doctor. So since my end goal isn't becoming an NFL player, I made that change.
Although as a neurosurgeon, you might wind up treating some of them, God forbid.
Yes, because those back-breaking hits.
It's dangerous, that's for sure. Matthew,
I definitely do not like you.
Matthew, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm a nice dancer, and if you look at my college list that I applied to, it's hard to see the trend. It seems like a random assortment of colleges, and so the way I kind of decided which ones to apply to was I looked at where there was a strong engineering school, because my major is going to be mechanical engineering, and then also which schools had ice rinks nearby or on campus. And so I picked a combination of schools that had both engineering and an ice rink. And I did that because skating is a big part of my life, and I want to make sure that I continue that through college. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I've still not entirely sure how it's going to work out, like what Abdul was talking about with time management. But I definitely want to keep skating throughout college.
You might find yourself not sleeping as much. That's my one. That's the one lesson I took from college. When I wanted to do it all, the all couldn't involve very much sleep. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it was a way to get through.
There's a little thing that I like accumulated from my time, is like, there's like 3 things that you have to think about. It's like eating, sleeping, and having fun, and you can only have 2. So
right.
you're gonna Hopefully you'll choose eating, maybe.
It's a good one.
Eating, sleeping, or
Yeah.
studying, sleeping, and having fun. If you want to have those study and sleep, then having fun might be a little bit lower.
Right. Well, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once, I think is.
Yeah, not all at once. Balance is always key, and that's how you like keep a happy life, healthy life. Yeah.
Good advice. Alex, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on the applications themselves. And, hopefully that's not too traumatizing to think back to that part of the process. Was there anything that surprised you about the application? Was there something that was harder than you thought it was going to be or easier than you thought it was going to be? What was that? What was the actual sort of nuts and bolts of the application process like for you? Did I really stump you?
I can say for me personally, I was pleasantly surprised with how helpful all of the tedious tasks were in terms of applying to specific schools. So things like interviewing and writing essays and having to do all of those things. Like going into it, I was like, oh, dang, I have to write a 250-word essay on why I want to apply to this school. And that seemed like it was going to be an inconvenience more than anything. But then for all of the schools that had the why this school kind of essay, it forced me to figure out why I was applying to that school kind of, and it forced some introspection. And even when I was writing essays about myself, trying to sell myself to this specific school, like trying to figure out what about me was going to fit well with that school, it was also helpful. And like picturing myself there and figuring out even if I wanted to apply to more schools like that school, if it was a school I thought was going to be a good fit. And then obviously interviewing, getting to talk with people about the school. Yeah, it's terrifying having to do that, but it's really helpful in figuring out what about that school is going to be a good fit for you. If the interviewer thinks it's going to be a good fit for you, and just having that extra perspective it was more helpful than an inconvenience, I thought.
Thank you. That was really helpful. So we've gotten this question from a couple of different folks, and I am very curious about it as well. Is there anything that you wish you had done differently? Sort of now that you're sitting on the other side of this process, you've got the sweatshirt, the sticker for the back of the car, you know what rodent you're going to cheer for during whatever season is important at your school. You kind of know where you're headed. As you reflect on sort of how this process started and how it went through, is there any advice you'd give your younger self? Anything, if you could get a mulligan? I don't know if you know what that is. It's in golf when you take a second ball. If you could get a do-over, is there anything that you would do differently? So I'd love to hear each of you reflect on that, if you don't mind. And Anna, how about we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. I guess what I would do differently, I might time manage a little bit differently. I didn't get I wouldn't say a late start, but a little bit later than some of my friends, and that was definitely really stressful. And so I think I would just tell myself that like everyone is on a different path and everyone is on a different wavelength, because I might be applying to 8 schools and someone else might be applying to 20. And I knew someone that did that, and that was really crazy to me. But I think I would just tell myself that like you're gonna get through it, and then time manage for each of my schools and like set deadlines for myself, just so I could stay on top of it.
Thanks. Max, how about you?
Yeah, I would say for me, it was when I first started like looking at schools and trying to decide where to go. I did a lot of looking at US News and niche.com. And I really didn't like stop using those websites until like after I'd applied and like gotten into a lot of schools. And then when it came down to like choosing where to go, I realized that like I had gotten to some like prestigious schools that were like ranked first for design or second, and like actually looking at them, they weren't that great compared to some other schools. So I think going back and starting my research over, I would try to avoid like rankings and that kind of stuff, and just really try to find what suits me and not, whatever's in the top 10 for US News. Yeah.
Thank you. Matthew?
Yeah, I would say don't get caught up on things that you can't control. So especially with COVID, but then just in general, even without the pandemic, there is a lot of aspects in the college application process and the decision process that you don't have control over, and kind of stressing about those things and worrying about how they're going to affect your applications or which school you end up deciding to go to. I feel like it just kind of added an extra level of unnecessary panic to sometimes there. So I think just kind of it's hard to let that part go, but just kind of focusing more on what you actually can control.
Miles, how about you?
I think something that I actually started to do like after I was getting acceptances that I wish I had done much earlier was really reaching out to students at the school. It's really easy to like email your admissions officer or like the admissions email and ask to be put in contact with a student. And like what I did was kind of put a bit about myself, like where I'm from, what I might intend to study, like because I knew going in, and then also some things that like I would like to talk to a student about so they can really put you with someone who would be more helpful, just because there are a lot of things that you can learn from a website and from a tour, but I think there are a lot of things mostly about like the social scene or what students are really like that you can't actually get like the most, at least from my experience, the most honest and accurate representation of those experiences without talking to students really in like the school at the moment. It's really hard to learn about like the party scene from like a 45-year-old admissions officer who's giving some kind of info session. And so I think talking with actual students, whether they be like sophomores or seniors who are currently enrolled, was something that I found tremendously helpful and wish I had done kind of before I even applied to a lot of places.
Thank you. Alex?
I personally think that I think Miles talked a little bit about this actually earlier, but visiting schools, even if they're not schools you're applying to, is important if for no other reason than to have a reference point so that you can then compare that to similar schools. So like I live in Connecticut and I'm going to a school in Maine. It's a pretty long drive, but like it's a place that I could drive and visit. And all of these schools I applied to for the most part were in a similar situation where I can physically go and visit. So I've lucked out in that department. My brother, who's a junior in high school right now, isn't as fortunate in that department. He is looking at schools in the Midwest and it's farther, and he's not going to get to visit all of the schools he's applying to. But an issue I fell into was during the pandemic, I didn't want to drive 5.5 hours and get to Maine. Couldn't really legally do that anyway. So I didn't visit any small schools until after I had applied to a whole bunch of small schools. I had visited a big school and a medium school just in my area. So I was like, knew I didn't want to go to a big school, considered going to like a medium-sized school, and then figured small school would feel probably the best. I applied early decision to a medium-sized school and was rejected right out of the gate. Fantastic start, but honestly, best case scenario for me personally, because when I started getting into my other schools, the small schools were the ones I wanted to go to. And I didn't know that when I applied early decision. If I could do it again, I probably wouldn't have wasted my early decision on a school that I wasn't completely sold on. But visiting schools, even if they're not the schools you're applying to, just so you can get a similar feel for even something as basic as size, is so important. Because after I visited a small school, I knew that that was the kind of school I wanted to go to, not even a medium school where I probably would have been happy, but not as happy. So visiting, even if it's not on your applicant list, is very important.
I think I would echo that also, because what is small and what is kind of medium size and what is large on a college campus can be something that you've never experienced before in high school. And it's really different than like tall grande vente, like knowing which one's like right for you. So I think that's helpful too, to recognize like what does small mean on the college on a college campus, a small college can be bigger than, could be bigger than some public high schools. So it really does vary. Abdul, how about you? What advice would you give your younger self?
To have a preference. In the beginning, I was really like, okay, I've made it here. All I have to do is now go to college. And I didn't really have an area where I was just like, okay, I want to go to an urban school. I want to go to traditional. Really, I was just like, I want to go to college. I didn't really have like too much of an idea of what kind of college I wanted to go to. I just knew I want to go to a college, do medical, and somewhere where I know that I'll be treated nicely. And so that's the biggest part for me that was hard to understand, is where I would be treated nicely. So I would always go through different like colleges, and I would talk to the admission counselors, and whichever one I felt like more family or more connected to, that was the one that I chose to be like more, I guess you can say, more personalized. And another thing, man, I forgot the second thing I was thinking of. Man, I can't remember.
You can let us know if you think of it. Ashley, how about you?
Okay, I have two things, and one of them follows really nicely after what Abdul just said. So I'll be quick. The first thing is if you think you know, you probably do. And I think that that's relevant on both the application side and then also the decision side. I had this list. I was the crazy person that had this huge list. And then I sat down and I was like, okay, if I got in there, I wouldn't go. I don't want to go here. And this application is horrid. I would never want to fill out 12 supplements. And I just I actually thought about it, and I was like, okay, I don't even want to go there. I'm doing it for the name. I'm doing it because my parents said. I'm doing it because I heard a thing. And so I think when you're making your list, and I did early decision, and I almost did early decision to a school I didn't even really want to go to because I felt all this outside pressure. And I knew that. And at the last minute, I switched, and it worked out great. I mean, I got into that school, and that's where I'm going. So I think that if you know on the front side, and obviously that applies to the other side too, when you're making your decision, that like, if this feeling is pulling you toward here and it's possible for you, go with that, because in the end, like, that will steer you, like your gut feeling can steer you better than anything else. And then the second thing really quick is I just saw something pop up in the Q&A box kind of addressing this, is I think that the college process, I think I can speak for almost everyone here, can cause a lot of tension in the family, and maybe to just not resent your parents throughout the process, because whether or not they know much about the college process, they know how to read, they know how to write probably, and they can help you in these kind of ways, and they can read your essays for you, and they can help you talk, just even if it's just spit ideas off of each other for what to write. Do you think this would be a good fit for me? Just use your parents, because I kind of pushed mine away during this process, and looking back, they could have offered a lot of insightful things because they know you well, and they have insight, and to use them during this process.
Actually, that's terrific, because I actually was going to send that question to you. So I love that you answered it. I didn't even have to send it to you. Does anyone else want to telepathically answer a question? Abdul, I also was going to ask you. You're right.
Oh, no, I remember what I was about to say.
Oh, you remember your thing. Okay, good.
I was about to say before is you're going to see your friends go to the different colleges, which is going to like make you want to go there as well. But you have to be able to differentiate what you want and what like your friends want you to do. Because that was also a big thing for me. I saw my friends mainly going to Clemson, and that made me want to go there too. I'm like, I've been with these people for years, and now I feel weird separating from them. But I understand that they want to go to Clemson because that's what they feel like, that's what they want to do. But I knew what I want to do, and Clemson just wasn't my path. So I was able to find my own way, and that's just something you just have to learn to do, and it's going to be really hard. But once you choose the college and you feel good about it, you'll be happy that you didn't go with your friends. You can still talk to them later.
Your real friends will be with you forever. Matthew and Alex, I wanted to ask you about major. So someone was asking, posing the question, sort of, how did you find out what you wanted to major in? What inspired you? And Alex, I want you to talk about being undecided, because that is the most popular major at every college. And most people spend the first 2 years that way. So I want you to talk about being boldly and bravely not certain about what you want to do. And Matthew, if you would talk about knowing that you want to be an engineer, because that really is kind of a cleave, right? You kind of either know you're an engineer or you're not. When I was applying to college, I was filling out my application. It was paper. I mean to tell you that I am that old. And I was filling out the application that said, do you want to apply to the School of Arts and Sciences or the School of Engineering? And I looked at my dad and I said, do I want to be an engineer? And he laughed. So I checked the other box. I did not have a real sense of what engineering was all about. I didn't know if you love math and science, you love problem solving, it might be your thing. So if you could talk about how you found that to be your thing, Matthew, and then Alex, if you could talk a little bit about what it's like to not know what you want to do and go for it anyway. Matthew, you're going first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think I've always known, really. Both my parents were engineers, so they kind of exposed me to it early on. And I can't remember a time when I didn't want to become an engineer. I've kind of oscillated about what kind of engineering. I had it narrowed down to 3 choices: chemical engineering, electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering going into the application process. But then most of the applications, they ask you to pick one. And so in the process of thinking about what kind, I decided on mechanical engineering because I really enjoy building things with my hands and seeing projects kind of take shape and each little piece of the project fit into place. And like you mentioned, the problem solving, I just find it very satisfying to solve complex problems. And just kind of like the stepwise process of the engineering design process. I find that to be something that I enjoy. Yeah, and so I guess that I've always known, and that kind of influenced which schools I applied to. I looked at which ones had strong engineering programs, and then also which ones were hands-on, because that's another big thing about mechanical engineering and how I learn. I like to be able to work with the things and do a lot of teamwork and stuff like that. And so I made sure to, most of the schools advertise that. So one of the big things with the essays and stuff, they usually ask why do you want to apply to this school. And so I always went on the websites. And so on the school's websites, it'll give some of the things like that. And I specifically looked for schools that said they had hands-on teaching and stuff like that. And then I would talk about that in the essay and talk about how I've grown up doing building projects, whether it was Legos or circuits or doing stuff with wood or whatever. And kind of how that would fit well with the school's philosophy on teaching engineering. Yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering if you're going to mention Legos, because I have yet to meet an engineer who didn't build a lot of Legos and usually has the Death Star or whatever's the biggest, coolest thing they built is still in their room somewhere in the house still. Alex, how about you? Tell us about not knowing yet.
Yeah, so I'm on the complete opposite side of that spectrum. I'm going to a tiny liberal arts school, so a lot of people are kind of similar to me in that I'm not there's not the arts and sciences and engineering thing. It's just this school and that's it. So I knew that going in, and that was one of the reasons I was looking at a lot of liberal arts schools, was because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I wanted to have the freedom to explore different interests. Currently, I took a psychology class this year that I absolutely loved. Never have taken a psychology class before. So currently my plan is to follow psychology a little bit and see where that takes me. But I've also had a class every year of high school that I've really enjoyed and considered pursuing. So I knew that I wouldn't want to enclose myself in any singular major or any singular track, just because for me personally, I'm not in a place where I can confidently make that decision and stick to it. Like right now, I'm going to Colby. They have this new artificial intelligence program there. And so I was looking at computational psychology. I have no experience with computers whatsoever. But when I'm looking at the courses that I'm taking next year, I'm going to make sure a computer science course is a part of it so I can experiment with it. And I think that's sort of something to keep in mind as you're looking at schools that you're applying to for specific majors or interests or whatever. Don't just look at things that you've done before and you know you're good at. Look for things that you want to try. That's part of the point of getting an education, is figuring out what you're good at and what you're bad at and what you love and what you hate. And all of that's going to kind of add up to some sort of career in the future, but it's going to take a little messing around with to get there for some people. Like Matthew, all the power to you. I love that you've known for so long. I'm just not, that's just not what is my situation. So it's, both are completely okay, and both are, don't panic if you don't know what you're doing. Chances are a lot of people who go into a school with a major in mind end up switching the major, sometimes within the school they applied into, sometimes into a completely different school. So a lot of this I'm saying to you guys is I'm reminding myself that it's okay that I don't know right now. It's good practice for me to hear it out loud, because it is scary, but it always works out. And so many people are undecided. So you're definitely not alone. And there's a way to go about the whole process, even if you don't exactly know what you're doing yet.
And I will say, if you aren't sure about what you want to study, that one of the things you should do when you're looking at schools is look at their advising program to make sure that they're going to help you figure that out. So Anna's going to UGA, and they have this Explorer program the first year where you get to you take a lot of different assessments and you try a lot of different things so you can figure out what it is that you want to major in. They help introduce you to all of the different opportunities there are at a place like UGA, which involves, there's a major in turf management, which I just still kind of can't get over that's like a real thing. So
I was just looking at that. My roommate and I were like looking at all of the interesting majors that they have, and UGA has so many interesting ones, like turf management. I don't really know what that entails, but yeah.
I think it means like running a golf course or something. So, but you'll look at the school to make sure they're going to help you figure out what it is you want to study if you don't know yet. I think that's important. And there was a question also about how does an admissions officer look at an application that comes in undecided? And what I would say as a former admissions officer is if someone says they know what they want to major in, it throws a spotlight on that part of their application. So Matthew says he wants to be an engineer. So we're going to look really closely at math and science courses and grades, and are his extracurriculars lined up with that. For someone who thinks that they want to study medicine eventually, like I would expect Abdul would have maybe done some internships or shadowing or volunteered at a hospital, that sort of thing. We want to see that you've kind of tested that hypothesis and it comes out strong. So whereas if you don't declare a major interest on your application, then it's not that spotlight that's shining, it's looking at everything sort of as a whole and in its own context. So if you have a strong area, feel free to throw a spotlight. If you're not yet sure where that is, you don't need to throw a spotlight anyplace yet. That would be my advice. I wonder, Miles, you saw a question in the chat about what questions you were asking. So do you have any great questions you could share with the audience about good questions to ask when you're visiting a school or talking with an admissions officer? Because that can seem intimidating at first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some pretty standard questions. Just I know for myself, Greek life wasn't really something I was hugely enthusiastic about. So I always asked is Greek life big on campus? And also will you feel left out if you're not involved in it? Or is it overwhelming to people who aren't involved with it? Also a question that I thought was pretty unique, but then found later I was not the only person asking was, would you say the students at whatever school are more competitive or collaborative? And so I think that was definitely really helpful, because I know some people who really wanted to go to a school that was very academically focused. They were on one path, they knew what they wanted to do, they wanted to study a really specific or niche idea. And so they were okay with somewhere that was really focused on the academics. Personally, I was a little more interested in I know what I want to study, but also exploring some other things and having a school community that would allow me to do that. So having that collaborative thing would be nice. I also know that personally, I researched the schools before I went to visit them. I know some people who don't really do like in-depth research until after they go on the tour, just because sometimes you go on a tour and you're like, this is not for me. The vibes are tremendously off. That happened a couple times to me. I will admit I left a tour like halfway through just because it was really like, I could not see myself there. I was not enjoying it. But I think asking about really specific traditions or really specific places on campus also are a good way to feel a natural answer from the tour guides. They often, like, I was a tour guide at my high school this year, or for the past couple of years, but you like prepare answers to questions you're expecting, but when you ask about more specific things, not in an effort to catch them off guard, but just in an effort to get them to talk about something they're interested in that people don't always ask about, is a good way to really peek through like a prepared face that they might put on.
Thank you, Miles. That was really helpful. We've gotten several questions about some nitty-gritty details on the application, and in particular about essays. So Anna and Max, I wonder if you could share with us some of your best advice on approaching the all-important college essay questions.
Yeah, I can start. Okay, so the essays, honestly, I was a little overwhelmed at first, but I think the first thing that, or like the thing that helped me a lot was to just start writing, because sometimes you can just get so blocked about what you're going to write about and what you're going to say. And so sometimes when you just like put your fingers to the keyboard and you just like start, even if it's like just word jam, like jumbling in your brain, like it literally could be anything, but I feel like once you start, that's when you can start to edit and go back and say like, oh, I liked this part, maybe I'll add something about this. But also it's good to plan out what you're going to say too, especially for the more like big picture essays, like why this school. Those I really had to think about, so I would research the school, which actually really helped like deciding if I even wanted to apply to that school, because you're finding out little things about the school that you might be interested in.
Thanks. Max, how about your advice on the essays?
Yeah, so I would say the thing that I was most grateful that I did was to start on my Common App pretty early. So I think I started working on the essay like at the very beginning of August, while I was still trying to figure out where I wanted to go. And I didn't just write one essay. I think I wrote like 5 Common App essays for one question. None of them like edited or really like finalized at all. More just word vomiting and just figuring out what I like the most. And then by the time I had a selection of schools that I wanted to apply to and a long list of supplemental essays, I found that a lot of what I had written for all of my Common App essays worked for a lot of the supplemental essays too. So I think in total, I only wrote like 6 essays for probably close to 20 questions. And I found that just reworking those essays, especially because they were essays I really liked and that I'd worked really hard on and I knew were good, and just reworking those for specific schools and their specific questions, or just for the Common App for that one specific school, was really helpful. And it saved a lot of time, but it also just ensured that everything I was writing was good, and I knew it was good. So yeah.
Thank you. Ashley, I know you've answered a couple of questions about essays in the chat. Are there some things that you'd want to share with the whole group?
Yeah, so Max definitely just touched on this, and I think it's a really, really good point about reusing essays. And that was a question that someone asked. And of course, you can definitely reuse essays. Like Max said, there are certain staple essays that are asked quite often. And if it's a little bit different, you can quickly rework that into a fitting answer. Things like, tell me about your extracurriculars or your passions or an academic interest. I mean, sometimes you'll get a crazy one like, I had what's my favorite word, and I had to go with that one. I had to just do something else for that one. But usually you can kind of work these core essays into fitting for any school that you're applying to. The one condition on that I wrote in my written answer is this why this school question, which almost every school asks. And that one needs to be very, very tailored and specific to that school. This is where you do research, you go on the website, you take notes if you do a virtual tour and say like, I saw on my virtual tour that you offer this, this, and this, or I talked to a student who said this. That's very specific to that school. And that obviously cannot be reused. The structure can, but the actual essay cannot. And then the one other thing that I wrote in the written answer is my big advice that I always give to junior friends and to my younger brother is to start, as horrible as it sounds, try to do a little bit over the summer before your senior year. I wrote my Common App essay over the summer, and that alleviated a lot of stress trying to balance my schoolwork and my extracurriculars and everything and all the other supplemental essays. So if you can just start at least thinking, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to have everything ready to be sent off. No, just if you can get started, brainstorm, write a draft, start looking at the colleges you might want to apply to. Just do a little something over the summer to just take a little bit off your plate.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, absolutely.
I also found that writing some of the essays were pretty fun too. I really dreaded the process before I actually started, but a lot of schools ask really cool questions. Like Ashley was talking about, what's your favorite word, or like write an email to your future roommate. Just some really cool questions that made you think, but were also just a lot of fun to answer. So yeah.
That's great. I love that you guys like the word essay. That's on the UVA application, if you're wondering. And my friend Marjorie wrote that question. So Abdul, we talked earlier about scholarship searching being part of the application process for you. And I wonder if you got any advice about maybe tools that you used when you were looking for scholarships, and any advice you got for students out there who are also looking to try and make college a little more affordable.
The first thing I did is always look at the actual college that you're trying to go to, or if you haven't decided, you can make a more generalized search and see, like, I use like scholarship.com. I use Niche also has some. I have FastWeb. There's so many different like scholarship sites that you can go on. And they're really helpful. And using like UAB, for instance, had something called Be Smart. And so I was on that all the time, getting scholarships, blah, blah, blah. And finally, at the end, I actually fully covered my tuition for that. And so scholarships, like, they're really tedious because they're like, you don't know if you're going to get them or not. But once you get them, they slowly accumulate and they make a big difference in your college admissions decision. Another thing that you might want to use when it comes to scholarships is essays that you use from college, like for colleges, because some of these scholarships will actually ask college level essays. And so like, I know I had a Foot Locker essay that asked me for my career goal, and I was like, oh wait, I already wrote this. And so I just imported that in, changed up a little bit of things saying, I love Foot Locker. I don't purchase anything from there, but okay. But it's nice to like just be able to reuse essays. And I know as soon like as I have to get back my school computer, I'm gonna take all those essays off. I'm gonna put it on my like hard drive or something like that, because those essays are really essential to like how you're gonna be writing papers from now on. And so you can just keep those forever, and use them for other things too. Use them for your future essays. If I try to get more scholarship money, I have more essays I can put down.
I'm so glad that you thought of that, Abdul. That is a great piece of advice, to like put all your college essays, take them out. If you have them on like your school Google account, you won't be able to access them after you graduate and they expunge it. And I've had students that I worked with come back to me years later saying, do you still have that essay that I wrote about blah, 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 because I need it for grad school or for this internship application or something else. So you own it. You wrote it. It's your thing. Those are your ideas, and you should hang on to them, and you never know when they might be useful again. I think that's great advice, Abdul, and I would echo all of it. A couple of resources that I would just mention that I find helpful. FastWeb is a website that a lot of people use for scholarship searches. It just gets you a lot of junk mail. So a lot of people will make an email address that just gets that stuff, so that doesn't kind of get intermingled with their regular email address. So like, you know, you can make an email like Abdul goes to college at blankety-blank.com, right? And everything goes there, and you can check it periodically. I really like Going Merry, which tries to do for scholarship searches what the Common Application has done for applications. So the Common Application, which you've heard us refer to a few times, is accepted by more than 900 colleges and universities, not just in the US actually, but several schools abroad as well. And they share a common application form. So you can write your name one time and they will all get it. You write one essay and they'll all receive it. And so that is much harder to find on scholarship searches, but Going Merry is trying to do some of that to make it, to do what Abdul did for himself in terms of figuring out like, oh, this essay and this essay can both go to these different scholarships, and maybe I get both of them as a result. More bang for your buck, as it were. There's also something called Merit Scholarship List that's an educational consultant has put together. That's a lot of those school-based scholarships that you can get because of particular GPA and SAT or ACT scores. And that can be really helpful if that's something that you're looking at. So of course, Appleruth is not going to host an event without talking a little bit about standardized testing. For those of you who don't know, Appleruth is a tutoring and test prep company that works with students all over and helping them achieve their academic and personal goals. It is our passion and our commitment and our mission to help students develop their self-belief so that they can accomplish whatever it is they set out for themselves. And we had the privilege of working with all of these students as part of their college search, and we take that as great honor. It's a great responsibility. So I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about standardized testing, the role it did or did not play as you got to apply during a year when it was very optional. Testing, taking it was optional, and then submitting it was optional. So Max, I know you didn't get to test at all. True that, right? And there are several other students who are in similar boats just based on where they were in the world. Other students had a chance to test a few times and saw some good improvement, I think, from that. I wonder if a couple of you, if anybody sort of feels moved to share their story about sort of when they started, what was valuable about it. Did they decide to send scores to some schools and not to others? And that kind of thing. Does anybody sort of have a piece of that puzzle they want to share? Miles, how about you start us off, and Anna too?
Yeah, sure. So I started in, I think like September of my junior year. I took like a practice ACT and a practice SAT just to see which I did better on. And then I was like, I will just study that one and take that one. I ended up doing like actually exactly equivalent. And so I just went with the ACT because I have two older sisters who both did that. So I was more like in tune with that already. And then I did a couple months of preparation, and then I took the test in December, and I only took it once because I was like comfortable with my score. And then I didn't really have an opportunity to take it again after a couple of months because they all got canceled. But I think what was most helpful for me was definitely the practice tests. I know that like studying specific things like concepts in math that maybe you haven't learned yet, or certain ideas in like literature and stuff are really important. But for me, really practicing like under testing environments and timing and stuff like that was the most helpful, just so when I went into the day, like there wasn't any stress of like, will I not finish? Because like I had done it, I think 3 or 4 times beforehand. In terms of sending scores to schools, I'm not really sure like if they will maintain an optional like testing idea, but personally what I was told by like a couple of adults whom I like kind of leaned on in the process was send your score in if it's like within or above the like range that the school said. And so for me, it was like on the higher end or above on all the schools. So I just sent it in, but I definitely know a lot of people who didn't send in scores and still got into some highly competitive institutions. And so I don't think there was necessarily like an incredible hindrance if you didn't send in scores at all. And so that I think comes down more to like your personal whatever situation or like decision.
Yeah, I started like around the same time as Miles, like junior year. And I'm very happy that I started early because of COVID. And so you never know what's going to happen. And I think for me, since I did Apple Ruth tutoring, like I did it on a weekly basis. So I did it every week. And for me, that was really helpful just to stay on a schedule. And just to like have that time where you set aside to do tutoring and just to focus on studying. And I did the ACT, and originally I did so bad on it, like it was really embarrassing. And then I kept working at it, and even with my classes too in junior year, I felt like the classes that I was taking actually kind of helped on the test. And I just say like just to keep going for it and to focus on the subjects that you might need a little bit more help with, because especially if you want to super score your score, and if your school accepts a super score, that will really help in the end.
Thank you. Matthew, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little about what I did. So I started in August for my junior year. And I want to echo what Anna said about the schedule. So Apple Ruth did a great job of scheduling leading up to the test. And so we plotted it out like 3 weeks ahead, and then 2 weeks ahead, and 1 week ahead. And we plotted out what we need to work on each week. And I thought it really helped to make sure that I was adequately prepared to take the test. And I took the SAT once, and I took the ACT once. And I would suggest people to at least look at both of them, because so you might click with one more than the other. You really don't know until you kind of experience it. You don't have to actually take both. I did, but you could do a practice test of each or something like that. I think they're each subtly different. They have similar components, but some of them are just, they resonate more with certain people, and you'll do better on one of them usually than the other.
Thank you. Max, I know you never got to test. Do you think you got anything out of the work that you did to try and get ready for the test, even though you didn't actually get to sort of like do the bubble filling out in a gymnasium?
Yeah, I think I did. So I was in like an 8-week Apple Ruth course, and the last 2 weeks were like right when COVID hit, and so those were online, and then the test dates started getting pushed back. And so I just like, we kept studying throughout everything. I had an amazing tutor who, even when the class was over, would like send me an email update and like be like, okay, just do these pages out of the notebook that she gave us, and like just try to keep your mind on it. And so I studied for like probably another month and a half until I realized like I wasn't gonna be able to take a test till August. So I took a break, and then a month from the test, my tutor emailed me again, and we like started the whole process again of just studying for it, like basically doing everything again. And so I didn't get to take it. It got canceled, and then by that point I was just done with it. I was like, I'm not going to do it. And so I think the thing it taught me that I still use was time management skills. Just because my tutor was really cool and was constantly like checking in, and she kind of set everything up so that I was doing just a small amount every day, and doing the right amount every day, and was making sure I was doing it. So I did learn a lot in that sense. As far as like the actual content, in full honesty, I've like forgotten most of it. I think, yeah. I don't think like my application like was affected at all by not submitting a test score. I mean, the colleges made it pretty clear that it wouldn't. So in that sense, it was like kind of nice to not have to take it. But at the same time, like, you know, I did a lot of studying for it. I was pretty upset I didn't get to do it. But yeah, maybe I'll still take it.
Well, I think it also helps you know that you don't have to be afraid of standardized testing, that it won't keep you from grad school because you're not sure how to take a test, or not sure that the test will help reveal how, you know, how well you can learn and all the potential that you have. So there's some good stuff that's in there, even if you didn't get to show it on test day. Abdul?
I feel like the best way that I like understood the SAT was doing it over and over again. Um, like how Apple Roof gives you like the ability to have like these pre like tests that aren't really like the thing, but you can take it and it's like the same thing. Those are really helpful. I'm a person that like I needed like it's great for me to keep on doing the tests because like I get reading, math, and writing all in like one session and I can go back and do it again. I feel like that's better for me personally. I don't know how everyone else is, but then just doing one thing over and over again, I feel like you get tired of it and then you start hating it instead of like embracing it and like understanding you need to do this. And I just felt like it was better, more spread out, doing just different things over time. But again, there is a way where you can just do one subject and then move on, do it like through practice, just doing one subject, move on, do something you see in math that's hard, move on. And I just felt my score increased better when I kept on doing like pre-test and stuff like that. Oh, and about like the colleges, like with like excluding the SATs and stuff like that. I feel like that's true as well, and I feel like they were pretty fair, understanding that people could not take the test. Some colleges, maybe like UGA, they kind of feel like they were still looking at SATs, but that's because of UGA, Georgia Tech, stuff like that. But yeah, that's my spell.
Thank you. One thing, I know we need to wrap up because we're getting close to the end of time, but Ashley and Alex, one piece of the application we haven't talked about at all, and I feel like we'd be remiss if we don't touch on it, is recommendations. And one of you goes to a small private school, one of you goes to a big public school. So I wonder if each of you can talk about sort of how you went about asking for teachers' recommendations, and if you had to do anything sort of extra to help them know who you were in a virtual learning environment.
I can start. So I had this mindset, I'm not even sure who exactly told me this, but that I needed to get one humanities teacher and one STEM teacher to write one of my recs. And to write two, usually you have two. That's kind of the rule of thumb. And so I was thinking like, okay, some of the checklist things were, did they see me as a positive? Well, I hope all my teachers saw me as like a good student, but did I like have an especially good relationship with them? Did I excel in the class? Even if I did not excel in the class, did I show that I was trying and working on improvement? These were kind of the kind of classic things that you would have in mind. But the one catch is I know that it's a lot harder to get closer with your STEM teachers. And a good friend from my high school who's going to the exact same college as me did two humanities teachers, and it ended up being obviously totally fine for her. So just, I would say that if you've heard all these like predetermined rules that you have to do, you need a girl and a boy, that is really not the case. It's really about who you have the best connection with. And like Ginger mentioned, I go to a small private school. And so I have gotten the opportunity to get really close with my teachers. But if that's not the case for you, I mean, I think Alex has you better covered. But if you, as much as you can, just try to leave an impression that's genuine about yourself, because someone that actually knows you and can give like a real, I think it's pretty obvious if someone's writing like a fake recommendation about you and you're just trying to kiss up to them because they have a big title at the school or something like that. Just go with someone that you know well and that they know you as a person and not just like a letter in your grade book.
Yeah, I can definitely. So the school that I go to, it's not huge. There are close to 400 kids in my grade, so it's definitely bigger than a tiny private school. But it's not like surrounding towns in my area have closer to like 1,000 kids per grade, so it's not gigantic. But I can say confidently that one of the teachers, I had my AP US history teacher write one of my recommendations, and he had 3 classes. He had 60 kids, and most of those kids asked for recommendations. So I knew going in with him that I was going to have to sort of make it easy on him to write my recommendation. So he had this system. He's been teaching this class for a long time, knows how to write recommendations, where he sent us like questionnaires, sent our parents questionnaires, so that his like formulaic way of writing a recommendation could be easily replicated. So even if you don't have a teacher who's going to send you a form for you to fill out so that to guide his recommendation, do what you can to give them the data points to write your recommendation. So once you figure out what teacher you want to write your rec, make sure that, and you should ask them as early as possible, like juniors, if you haven't done it already, get on that. Sophomores, like as early as possible. I asked my teachers before the pandemic hit in March of last year, like I was on the earlier side with that, but it's because I was stressed about it. So I wanted to get it over with. But so once you ask early, and then once you ask, make sure you do what you can to make it easy on them. Participate in class, go for extra help, have conversations about them, about the material, not about the material, in like obviously an appropriate and reasonable way. Like, but do what you can to make yourself, like Ashley was saying, more than just your the number or letter in the grade book. Like, do make yourself a person, because at the end of the day, colleges aren't always just looking at you as a student, they're looking at you as a person. So the better the teacher can understand you as a person, the better they're going to be able to write a recommendation for you. And it's harder in bigger schools where a lot of students are competing for recommendations. So help out your teacher, not just like putting books away, but like giving them information and data points to write those recommendations on.
Thank you so much. I am grateful to all of you for joining us this evening. Thank you for joining us for all of College Week. If you're registered for any of the events, you will see tomorrow all of the events. We will share the recordings with you and the presentations. I want to say thank you to our terrific panelists. Thank you for sharing your time, your ideas, your energy, your thoughtfulness with us. We are grateful for your candor and your great job answering questions both live and in the chat. If you are ready to take the next step, students, we are really happy to help you practice. As the students mentioned, the test itself is the best preparation for the test itself. So you can visit us at appleruth.com/services/test, and we will get you started with a practice test. You can take either or both, whatever you'd like to do to get started. Thank you all again for joining us. Have a wonderful evening and good night.